Meredith Kane had been chasing the perfect shot for 3 years, traveling the world with her camera as the only witness to her grief. But when she arrived in the small coastal town of Beacon Harbor to photograph its historic lighthouse, she never expected that the lighthouse keeper's nephew would teach her that some moments were too precious to capture through a lens and were meant to be lived with an open heart instead. Before we explore Meredith's journey from behind the camera to in front of life itself, and the love that develops in the most picturesque of settings, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us bring you more beautiful romantic stories every week. Now, let's follow Meredith to Beacon Harbor, where the perfect shot might be the one she never takes. Meredith Kane adjusted her camera settings as she drove into Beacon Harbor, Maine, the late afternoon sun casting the small coastal town in the golden light that photographers called magic hour. At 31, she had been a professional photographer for 8 years, but the last 3 had been spent wandering from assignment to assignment, always searching for the one perfect shot that might somehow make sense of the loss that had changed everything about her life and career. Beacon Harbor was her latest stop in a series of travel photography assignments for National Geographic Traveler, documenting historic lighthouses along the eastern seaboard. The assignment was exactly the kind of work that had once excited Meredith about her career: beautiful locations, rich history, and the challenge of capturing both the technical precision and emotional resonance that made photographs memorable. But since losing her fiancé David in a climbing accident 3 years ago, Meredith had been going through the motions of her professional life without finding the passion and creativity that had once made her one of the most promising young photographers in the industry. She could still produce technically excellent work, but the spark that had made her images special had disappeared along with her ability to see beauty in the world around her. The assignment in Beacon Harbor was supposed to last 5 days, long enough to photograph the lighthouse in various lighting conditions and weather scenarios while documenting the town's maritime history and connection to the sea. The assignment was exactly the kind of work that had once excited Meredith about her career: beautiful locations, rich history, and the challenge of capturing both the technical precision and emotional resonance that made photographs memorable. But since losing her fiancé David in a climbing accident 3 years ago, Meredith had been going through the motions of her professional life without finding the passion and creativity that had once made her one of the most promising young photographers in the industry. She could still produce technically excellent work, but the spark that had made her images special had disappeared along with her ability to see beauty in the world around her. The assignment in Beacon Harbor was supposed to last 5 days, long enough to photograph the lighthouse in various lighting conditions and weather scenarios while documenting the town's maritime history and connection to the sea. Meredith had booked a room at the Harbor Inn and planned to work alone, as she had been doing for the past 3 years, keeping human interaction to the minimum necessary to complete her assignments. Beacon Harbor's lighthouse stood on a rocky promontory at the edge of town, accessible by a winding path that offered spectacular views of both the structure itself and the rugged coastline that surrounded it. The lighthouse had been built in 1847 and was still operational, though it was now maintained by the Coast Guard rather than a resident keeper, as it had been for most of its history. Meredith's first afternoon of shooting went smoothly, with the golden light and dramatic coastal setting providing exactly the kind of scenic opportunities that made for successful travel photography. She captured the lighthouse from multiple angles, documenting both its architectural details and its integration into the natural landscape that had made it necessary for maritime safety. As Meredith packed up her equipment after sunset, she was approached by a man who introduced himself as Marcus Webb, the nephew of the lighthouse's last official keeper and now the volunteer coordinator for the Lighthouse Museum and Preservation Society. Marcus was in his early 30s, with dark hair and blue eyes that seemed to reflect both the sea and sky that surrounded them. And he had the weathered appearance of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. Marcus explained that he had been watching Meredith work and was impressed with her professional approach and obvious expertise with the challenging lighting conditions around the lighthouse. He mentioned that the Preservation Society had been hoping to commission professional photographs for their upcoming fundraising campaign, and he wondered if Meredith might be interested in additional work during her stay in Beacon Harbor. Meredith's initial response was polite but non-committal, explaining that her current assignment kept her schedule fairly busy, and that she typically didn't take on additional projects during magazine shoots. However, Marcus's obvious passion for the lighthouse and its history intrigued her, and she found herself asking questions about the Preservation Society's work and the lighthouse's role in the community. Marcus invited Meredith to visit the Lighthouse Museum the following morning, offering to provide historical context and access to areas that weren't normally open to photographers. Meredith accepted the invitation, partly for professional reasons, but also because Marcus's enthusiasm and knowledge created an interesting contrast to the solitary approach she had been taking to her work. The Lighthouse Museum was housed in the keeper's cottage adjacent to the lighthouse tower, and it contained an impressive collection of maritime artifacts, historical photographs, and documentation about the lighthouse's role in guiding ships safely through the dangerous waters off Beacon Harbor. Marcus served as both curator and tour guide, and his deep knowledge of the lighthouse's history was matched by his storytelling ability and genuine love for preserving maritime heritage. As Marcus shared stories about the lighthouse keepers and their families who had lived in the cottage over the decades, Meredith found herself seeing the location through different eyes. Rather than just a photogenic structure to be documented, the lighthouse became a place where real people had lived, worked, and formed communities dedicated to saving lives and protecting mariners from the dangers of the sea. Marcus's tour included access to the lighthouse tower itself, where Meredith was able to photograph the original Fresnel lens and capture views of the coastline from the perspective of the keepers who had maintained the beacon for over a century. The experience of being inside the lighthouse and understanding its function added depth to Meredith's photographic approach, and she found herself taking more thoughtful, contemplative images than the scenic shots she had planned. During their time in the lighthouse tower, Marcus shared his own connection to the place, explaining that his great-uncle had been the last official keeper before the lighthouse was automated in the 1970s. Marcus had spent childhood summers in Beacon Harbor and had developed a deep appreciation for maritime history and the role that lighthouses played in coastal communities. Marcus's decision to move back to Beacon Harbor permanently had been motivated by his desire to preserve the lighthouse and ensure that future generations could understand its historical significance and ongoing cultural importance. He worked as a marine biologist for the state environmental agency, but he devoted most of his free time to lighthouse preservation and maritime education. Meredith was struck by Marcus's commitment to preserving something meaningful for its own sake, rather than for personal gain or recognition. His approach to heritage conservation reminded her of the passion she had once brought to photography, when she had been motivated by the desire to document and share beautiful or important moments rather than simply completing assignments for professional advancement. As Meredith continued her lighthouse photography over the following days, Marcus became an unofficial guide and collaborator, sharing his knowledge of tides, weather patterns, and optimal viewing angles while respecting her professional expertise and creative vision. Their collaboration enhanced both the quality of Meredith's photographs and her understanding of the lighthouse's role in the community. Marcus's presence also reminded Meredith of how much she had missed meaningful collaboration and shared enthusiasm for creative work. Working alone for 3 years had been necessary for managing her grief, but it had also isolated her from the kind of intellectual and artistic stimulation that had once made her work exciting and fulfilling. The weather during Meredith's 3rd day in Beacon Harbor provided exactly the kind of dramatic conditions that could produce extraordinary lighthouse photography. A winter storm with high winds, heavy seas, and intermittent breaks in the clouds that created spectacular lighting effects. Marcus warned Meredith about the dangerous conditions near the water, but he also helped her identify safe vantage points where she could capture the lighthouse functioning in exactly the conditions it had been built to withstand. Working in storm conditions required all of Meredith's technical skills and experience, but it also reminded her of why she had become passionate about photography in the first place. The challenge of capturing powerful natural forces and the satisfaction of creating images that conveyed both beauty and danger rekindled some of the creative excitement that had been missing from her work. Marcus's assistance during the storm photography went beyond simple guidance about local conditions. He helped protect her equipment from salt spray and wind, anticipated her needs for different angles and positions, and provided the kind of seamless support that allowed Meredith to focus entirely on the creative and technical aspects of her work. The images Meredith captured during the storm were some of the best she had produced in years, combining technical excellence with the emotional depth and visual impact that had characterized her most successful early work. More importantly, the experience of creating those images in collaboration with Marcus had reminded her of the joy that came from sharing creative challenges and achievements with someone who understood their significance. That evening, as they reviewed the day's photographs in the warmth of Marcus's cottage near the lighthouse, Meredith realized that her feelings for Marcus were developing beyond professional appreciation and friendship. Marcus was intelligent, passionate about his work, and genuinely supportive of her creative process. But he was also kind, funny, and attractive in ways that reminded her of what she had been missing during her years of self-imposed isolation. Marcus's interest in Meredith was equally apparent, though he was respectful of her professional focus and didn't pressure her for personal information about her background or reasons for traveling alone. Their conversations during the storm photography had revealed their compatibility in approaches to work, problem solving, and appreciation for natural beauty, but Marcus seemed content to let their relationship develop naturally without forcing personal revelations. Meredith's internal conflict about her growing attraction to Marcus was complicated by her awareness that her assignment in Beacon Harbor was temporary and that her lifestyle of constant travel was incompatible with the kind of relationship that Marcus might want to build. She was also struggling with feelings of guilt about being attracted to someone new while still processing her grief over David's death. The crisis in Meredith's emotional situation came when Marcus asked her to dinner at his cottage, clearly intending the invitation to be personal rather than professional. Meredith accepted, but she also felt obligated to be honest with Marcus about her recent history and her uncertainty about her ability to build new relationships. During dinner, Meredith shared the story of losing David and her subsequent 3 years of traveling alone while trying to process her grief and rediscover her passion for photography. Marcus listened with obvious compassion and understanding, acknowledging the difficulty of moving forward after such a significant loss, while also expressing his admiration for Meredith's courage in continuing to pursue meaningful work during such a challenging period. Marcus's response to learning about David was supportive rather than threatened or intimidated, and he made it clear that grief was a process that couldn't be rushed or forced to fit someone else's timeline. His maturity and emotional intelligence in handling Meredith's disclosure made her feel safe and understood in ways she hadn't experienced since before David's death. Their conversation also revealed Marcus's own experience with loss as he shared the story of losing his great-uncle, who had been like a father to him and had inspired his commitment to lighthouse preservation. Marcus understood that meaningful relationships often developed from shared experiences of loss and healing, and that the most important connections were often those that honored the past while creating space for new growth. As Meredith's assignment in Beacon Harbor neared its end, she faced the decision of whether to accept the Preservation Society's offer of additional work that would extend her stay or to continue with her planned itinerary of lighthouse assignments along the coast. The professional opportunity was attractive and would produce excellent work, but Meredith recognized that her real motivation for wanting to stay was her relationship with Marcus and her reluctance to leave just as they were beginning to explore their connection. Meredith's decision to extend her stay in Beacon Harbor marked a turning point in both her professional and personal life.
Rather than simply completing assignments and moving on to the next location, she was choosing to invest time and energy in building something meaningful with a person and place that had reawakened her passion for both photography and life. The additional work with the Preservation Society allowed Meredith to explore different aspects of maritime photography, including portraits of community members involved in lighthouse preservation, historical documentation of restoration work, and fine art images that captured the lighthouse's role in local culture and identity. Working with Marcus on the Preservation Society project also deepened their personal relationship as they collaborated on planning photo shoots, researching historical context, and developing materials that would effectively communicate the lighthouse's significance to potential donors and supporters. Their collaboration was both professionally productive and personally satisfying, combining their individual expertise in ways that enhanced their shared goals. Marcus's proposal came during Meredith's extended stay, on a morning when they were photographing sunrise from the lighthouse tower, and the conditions were perfect for the kind of dramatic, beautiful images that had first drawn Meredith to professional photography. Marcus presented her with a ring and a business proposition. He wanted to marry her and help her establish a photography studio in Beacon Harbor that would specialize in maritime and coastal photography while also serving the region's growing tourism industry. Meredith's acceptance of Marcus's proposal was emotional and immediate, representing not just her love for him, but her readiness to build a stable, rooted life after 3 years of wandering and searching.
Their wedding was held at the lighthouse during golden hour, with the ceremony timed to capture the same magical lighting that had first brought Meredith to Beacon Harbor and had provided the backdrop for their entire relationship. Meredith wore a dress that was both elegant and practical for outdoor photography, while Marcus wore a suit that reflected his professional dignity while remaining appropriate for their coastal setting. The wedding was attended by Meredith's family and close friends from her photography career, as well as Marcus's extensive network of colleagues from marine biology and lighthouse preservation work. The guest list also included many of the Beacon Harbor community members who had become subjects for Meredith's Preservation Society photography and who had embraced her as a permanent member of their coastal community. After their honeymoon, Meredith and Marcus established their life in Beacon Harbor, combining their individual careers with their shared commitment to maritime preservation in their growing photography business. Meredith's studio specialized in wedding photography, tourism promotion, and fine art coastal images, while continuing to document lighthouse preservation work throughout New England. Marcus's work as a marine biologist provided stability and allowed him to continue his environmental research while also supporting Meredith's photography career through his scientific knowledge of coastal ecosystems and weather patterns. Their professional collaboration enhanced both their individual work and their shared projects. Meredith's photography evolved during her first year of marriage, incorporating the emotional depth and authentic connection that had been missing from her work during her years of traveling alone. Her images of Beacon Harbor and the surrounding coastline captured not just scenic beauty, but the genuine affection and understanding she had developed for the place and its people. The lighthouse that had brought Meredith to Beacon Harbor with the promise of beautiful photographs had ultimately provided something much more valuable: a home, a partner who understood her creative vision and supported her healing journey, and a community where her work could serve a purpose beyond personal or commercial success. Marcus had shown Meredith that the perfect shot wasn't necessarily the one that captured the most dramatic lighting or the most technically challenging conditions, but the one that conveyed authentic emotion and genuine connection between the photographer and the subject. The images that had made Meredith's reputation during her years in Beacon Harbor were those that reflected her love for the place and its people, rather than her technical virtuosity or artistic ambition. Meredith Kane Webb had come to Beacon Harbor looking for lighthouse photographs that would complete another travel assignment, but she had found the lighthouse keeper's nephew who would complete her interrupted life and help her discover that the perfect shot was often the one that happened when she put down the camera and opened her heart to the possibility of love, community, and the kind of happiness that couldn't be captured through a lens, but had to be lived fully and gratefully each day. In the end, the photographer's perfect shot had been the decision to stop chasing the next image and start building the life that would give all her future photographs the depth, authenticity, and emotional resonance that came from working with love rather than loss as the driving force behind her creative vision. The lighthouse had guided her safely home to herself and to the love that would illuminate all her future work.